Hi, everybody. I'm Kristen Gilpatrick, Marketing Manager for the Wisconsin Historical Society Press. I'd like to welcome you to our first video in our Histories for the Holidays seasonal promotion, encouraging you to find your favorite history and share it for the holidays, gift it for the holidays. One of our favorite histories for any holiday is here. The author of it is here with us. Talking about his memoir, Good Seeds, Menominee Indian Food Memoir. And it really follows different foods that were harvested traditionally and the recipes that kind of go with them. It includes more quote unquote modern food styles, I guess, from the fair and things like that as well. If I recall, there might even be a chili recipe in there. But lots of wonderful recipes that are traditional to Wisconsin, traditional to the Menominee Indians. Some you'll recognize, some you probably won't, unless you're a Menominee Indian. And one that comes to mind that is really fascinating recipe, and I'll let Tom speak to it a little bit more, that we talked about when this book first came out quite a bit, got a little attention, was his section in the book called How to Cook a Beaver. I don't know if you recall, Tom, that's not something that everybody has for the holidays, and probably most don't have for the holidays, but was something that was cooked quite often. I don't know if you can speak a little bit about that.
I remember the last beaver that we had. Oh geez, it was still several years ago, back when I was in Kansas, and 3 years ago, back when I was in Kansas, and we actually went to Wisconsin to the reservation to pick one up that was held in a deep freezer for us. We brought that back to Lawrence, and I roasted it for many hours, and we had that kind of as my wife Denise's birthday meal. I can honestly say that, and I've had beaver a few times over the years, and I can honestly say, I mean, you know, it's one of those things you should try if it's there in front of you, but I'm not, you know, I sure as heck wouldn't go, you know, unless I was really hungry, you know, but otherwise I would not try to find a beaver to eat. Although, you know, you slather enough barbecue sauce on it, you can you know, I'm going to say you can, you know, it tastes good. And I have a lot of relatives who have eaten beaver quite often throughout the years. Not only, it's one of the few animals that has a big reserve of fat on them. And in the winter, you really need fat to metabolize the protein that you have. So, but in my opinion, my modern gourmet opinion now, I'm not a fan of roast beaver. No, and I'm not sure I would do that again. Other things I would do. We were talking about porcupine, and I can't even remember the circumstances and who it was with, but I would do porcupine again.
Yeah, I had a porcupine stew many years ago, and it was quite good. I really enjoyed it. Porcupine, beaver, what everyone in Wisconsin, as we're recording this video, is into and hearing about right now is venison and deer hunting. That sort of speaks to something you talk about quite a bit in the book, which is the seasonality of the food that Menominee Indians ate and eat, and how, you know, venison was at a certain time of year. And like you mentioned, the beaver having high fat content. So that's a good winter thing to have. I don't know if you can share some of the different seasons and some of the different foods that sort of tie them together a little bit.
when my grandfather was young, there was more elk than deer around. As the geography, as the agriculture of Wisconsin has changed from to where we now have big fields of things growing, that's more favorable to the deer population. Deer like big wide open places, elk like forested places. Elk had a lot of fat content on them also, whereas deer, this is some people are kind of astonished about this, but I was in my middle teens. Oh, gee, it might even been later than that, in my 20s, when I was eating some venison with some people, non-Indians, from off the reservation, and they had went to their back fields and shot a deer that was in their corn, eating leftover corn. And I was shocked that there was a layer of fat on the deer. I had never seen a venison, a deer meat with a layer of fat on it. On our reservation, deer kind of stay on the move. For whatever reason, maybe it's because we don't have big wide open spaces like on the farm areas that surround the reservation. Those deer that live in those areas, when the Orange Army descends upon the private lands of Langley County, Shawano County, Oconto County, the deer kind of run into the reservation to hide. And that's also deer season on the reservation. So they don't get much rest, I would imagine. The deer season is great up there. I never really went as a specific activity to go deer hunting. I mean, I went hunting and had gotten a couple of deer along the way over the years, but it wasn't something that I specifically practiced. I was more of an opportunist, whatever. And there's a real good reason for that too, and that it is much easier to clean a squirrel or a partridge than it is to clean a porcupine, a beaver, a deer, or a bear. Much easier. And although I was hungry, I wouldn't turn those things down. Fortunately, I guess I'm no longer that hungry. So I have to. So yeah.
Well, and as you got older, why did you decide to write this book about why those different foods and the seasons of those foods were important to the Menominee? What drew you to write about it?
It's holidays, and there was certain pleasurable moments in my life on the reservation, and usually those moments took place. There was food somewhere in the orbit of those moments, and looking back on it, you get the flavor of those moments from those kinds of foods that were in the orbit around you. Why did I also, a lot of this was when I began writing that book, it was 25 years ago that I started writing that, and it was just a stack of unrelated essays that at some point I did some editing and kind of got them in a continuous to tell a continuous story, a narrative, I can say like that. And I think that food is, we should think about where our food comes from, because if we think where our food comes from, we'll take better care of the land around us. And if we take better care of the land around us, we take better care of ourselves. I mean, one of the reasons that there is disease in certain parts of the country is because of the environmental damage in those parts of the world, right? In those parts of the country and in the world at large. And if we would consciously, take care of the land around us, we would be doing ourselves a favor. And not only ourselves, I mean, I think that when I talk about the world, for me, I mean, and the population of the world, I don't mean that just with the human population. I mean, there are populations of deer and bear and an animal population, and we are a part of that. And the deer hunting thing, it seems more ritualistic, ceremonial, in a kind of a primitive way. I mean, God knows I've done that. I mean, not done doing that, but I love Wisconsin, and I love northern Wisconsin, and I love hanging out in those little northern Wisconsin taverns during deer season. And you're sitting there, and the guys come in, and they're brushing the snow off of them, and they're getting their beer and their shot, and there's this camaraderie, and it really is. I mean, but yeah, I guess it is, ceremonial and ritualistic.
It's a shared food experience in a way, a shared cultural experience. And it reminds me in different ways of like you talked about maple syrup and the sugar run, and that was sort of a shared experience that everybody would anticipate and wait for. Or wild rice, which is on the front cover of the book. And that is what, can you explain the tie between wild rice, the Menominee, even the name, correct? It's very tied.
The thing about Menominees and my own name probably will explain it. It's Weso, right? But it's actually Kesuk, it's actually Perot. And it's just different, like for instance, when they called my family the Prots, that was the German translation of the Menominee word. I kind of lost my track on that. What
The Menominee of the wild rice and then
why it's not, although now we're very proud of that, right? People, the wild rice. It wasn't our name for ourselves. Okay, so like my family was a pro band, and that was what other people called us. But it was because when and we're originally from the Cree Nation, the Cree around the Hudson Bay, and we kind of spread out along with the Potawatomi, and we kind of spread out. And my people generally were those members, descendants of the Cree people that settled along the river mouths, along Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, wherever rivers emptied into there. And that's where the wild rice grew best. And they lived upon that wild rice. So when others would refer to those people, it was those people of the wild rice. And gradually that stuck, and one of the legends was that wherever Menominees traveled, wild rice would follow. And that's generally true.
So would you say wild rice was kind of maybe is still a staple of the Menominee Indian pantry? Oh,
Would I say it is now? If I said it wasn't, there'd be a whole bunch of Menominees pounding on my door tomorrow morning. Is it? Well, it is, and it isn't. Although we do have some rice beds along the west branch of the Wolf between the Open and Kashina, that's not enough area to grow enough rice to feed everybody a diet of wild rice. So we get ours. Well, we're here for our family. I order wild rice from a Lake Superior band of Chippewas or Ojibways. It's simply because they grow a lot of it there. But it is, I can't think of any family that doesn't eat wild rice on kind of a regular basis. It's one of those things, and it's coming back. As I said, those rice beds are getting more productive. More people are engaged in that activity. Especially as kind of a reaction against this proposed mine north of the reservation in Marinette County.
yep. So what would have been like a traditional recipe for wild rice, a traditional way? And what, I know in the book, there's like a wild rice casserole. I know they didn't make that in the 1800s, for example, but it's really good. I've had it. So what are kind of the new and old ways of making wild rice or eating it?
There was back in the day when people made wild rice, it was made in a skin bag, and they would fill the bag with water, wild rice, and they would throw rocks, hot heated stones in the skin bag, and that would cause it to boil, and that would cook the wild rice. I'm sure that was very delicious that way, but there wasn't salt, there wasn't pepper, and things, that squeeze of garlic, that maybe a bit of lemon juice to make it bright. There was nothing of that sort, right? I like wild rice needs some seasoning, and it needs some other stuff. Some of my fondest memories, my mom used to make wild rice soup with pork hocks, and so she would get smoked pork hocks and then boil those until they were soft and cooked. And because wild rice, basically takes 40 minutes to cook, and then boil the wild rice in with that. And I can remember looking at that, and this is going to sound a little crazy, right? But when you put in a bowl and you look at it with the wild rice and the bits of pork and the curly bits of pork fat in there, to me, and it still reminds me of this. I look at that and I see a swamp, a marsh where I see it looks just like that. Like if you were like to take a bucket of swamp water and pull it up, right? That's what a bowl of wild rice soup looks like. My idealized version of it. But as a kid, I used to think that, and that thought, that imagery still carries with me.
Because that's the imagery of what you had around you. That's where it's from. Yeah. And another staple from what you say in your book was corn. That you have a recipe in there that's fairly simple for a dried corn. And it's almost like eating a raisin to me.
Parched
they're,
corn,
they're,
yes.
yes, they're so good. And I had never had that until your book came out. And yet corn is so much a part of Wisconsin diets, let alone Menominee Indian diets as well. I don't know if you can talk about how sort of that came to be, the corn piece of, of food history.
I'm really not sure of what of how I settled on some of these recipes, or all my grandparents did, because really that's where I got my food preferences would be from my grandparents. At that time, we ate what we grew, and I suspect that one of the reasons we ate a lot of dent corn, which was the colored Indian corn, was because it was pretty hardy and it grew pretty well. Although now there are some, for instance, my uncle has some land and there is a field there, and it's one of the failed Catholic farms that they tried to set up at one time. And so we do have places we could grow gardens, but I can remember with my grandparents where they would hack out, a 15 by 15 foot patch of brush, and and very, with a lot of physical effort, and using only hand tools, chop up the ground and till it with, and eventually they could just use a hoe, and planting corn. They planted corn. And they also, so within that little area, they tried to get as much as they could.
Well, one of the recipes we're going to share with folks at the end of this video is your recipe from the book for cornbread. And we have a little video that shares it. We'll also share the recipe in the description so people can try it themselves. I don't know if you wanted to say anything specific about that recipe, and then I have another question for you at the end.
Well, let me kind of refresh myself on that. And it's kind of interesting. This particular recipe in the book uses baking soda, and that really, I'm not sure that my tribe, we use baking soda that much in our cooking. The Ho-Chunks, the Winnebagos, are kind of famous for, they use a lot of baking soda and everything. Kind of gives it a taste. I'm not sure why. But yeah, that looks like a great recipe. I mean, we eat a lot of cornbread here. Whenever I make chili, Denise makes a batch of cornbread. And much like my chili, which varies, daily, or batch to batch, so does our cornbread. I make cornbread with some hot pepper, some jalapeno in it. I think that's a very nice combination.
You're making me hungry. That sounds good. Well, my last question here, in this Histories for the Holidays Book Bites style program, is I would like to know what you would like, not just the readers, but you're also a father and a grandfather. What would you like them to know and understand about the Menominee Indian foodways that you write about? What would you like their takeaway to be from the writing you did?
A lot of what our indigenous foods back then were indigenous foods, and things that provided a really good diet are today considered weeds, like amaranth. And even wild rice, developers on the Great Lakes, to them it's just, an ornamental grass that could be gotten rid of if it gets too thick. And I would like some, and again, it goes back to if we respect those life forms, I mean, we'll treat them better and it'll come back, like karma. Our lives will get better. I mean, if the world was a beautiful place, I mean, it sounds corny, right? And really kind of we kind of weak, but if the world was a better place, we would be better. Our health would be better. And unfortunately, we do not engage in activities to make the world better. We engage in activities to subjugate whatever, certain people, certain resources. And we forget all about the natural world that we are a part of. And I can't stress that enough. We have become so detached from nature, from the things we eat. And that's what we need to reverse. I'll give you the perfect example. Langston Hughes, who was, with the Harlem Renaissance. He was actually born in Missouri, but he grew up in Kansas on a farm outside of Lawrence, Kansas. And farming in Kansas is pretty difficult. Ranching isn't, that's very easy. But farming is difficult. I mean, you have to work for a crop, especially there. And then he went on and he became this big famous poet. At the end of his life in Harlem, he was teaching little kids how to grow tomato plants in old tin cans. And I think my goodness, here this guy teaching people to feed themselves in adverse conditions. I mean, what a legacy. I mean, it was something to be very proud of, and that's something that we all need to do. We need to reconnect. We need to teach others. And it's not, every culture has this ability too. I mean, the Swedes up in Langley County, the Germans in Shano, and all of them have something very valuable to contribute. And we just kind of, we're giving people like Kanye West and the Kardashians too much airplay, and we need to start concentrating on real things. And food is real. Food is about as real as you can get.
And you're right, we don't always connect with where it actually comes from anymore, the way we used to. And a good place for people to start is to pick up your book and read through it and learn how you connected and found that connection for other people. I mean, really, Good Seeds, a Menominee Indian Food Memoir, is available at your favorite local book retailer. With all the shipping issues this year in particular, look in your local bookstores because they likely have this. You don't have to worry about the shipping. And so you can go to indiebound.org and find a bookseller near you, or of course you can always visit wisconsinhistory.org as well. In our online store, we do have copies as well. So again, I wish you all a wonderful holiday season. I thank our author, Tom Weso, for joining us. Thank you, Tom, and good night.
Good night.